Hello, everyone. I'm here for one of my stories. This is Lindsay Dunn, and today we are here to discuss Spencer. I have with me two of my fellow NC film critics. We have Jesse Nussman, host of the Film Inquiry, the latest podcast, and Hunter Heilman, who is the senior contributor at Elements of Madness. Jesse and Hunter, welcome to one of my stories.
Thanks for having me. And Hunter, I guess.
Yeah, no, okay, yeah, never mind. I guess I'm not here. No, thank you. It's always great to be involved. Happy to be here.
Yes.
Good to be invited to things.
Yeah, I like to be invited to things. I was invited to Sandringham Estate, as you can see in the background. I've been spending the Thanksgiving weekend here. Ha ha ha. Speaking of Thanksgiving, how was your weekend?
I didn't really have much. I worked, so I don't have any good stories.
I did too. I worked Thanksgiving night and pretty much every day since. Today's my first day off in a while. So no, it was very low key. And honestly, I prefer that. I would so much rather the holidays not be a huge like hullabaloo occasion. So this is preferable for me.
Mm-hmm. I like Thanksgiving because I feel like it's a pretty simple holiday unless you get caught up in the Black Friday thing, but which is actually technically not Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving itself is just about having food with people that you like being with.
It's all this. I mean, it's all in the same vein. And I mean, that's the thing. I think a lot of people with Thanksgiving is they're spending time with a lot of people they don't like, even though they are family. And that's the issue. Also, that's kind of is what we're talking about today, is someone spending time with family they don't like.
I don't know about you guys, but when I show up for Thanksgiving, my whole family, we have to weigh ourselves before and after just to see how much fun we had.
Oh, yeah, I don't need a scale for that. You can just tell when I leave.
I was going to say, Hunter, it was almost like you were, had you planted that, that we planted that whole thing.
Actually. I actually like my family. I know it's hard to believe, but yeah, no, I like the family that's around me.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's about, chosen family, but in Diana's case, she didn't get to choose, for this particular holiday. So today we are going to be discussing Spencer, which is directed by Pablo Larrain and written by Stephen Knight, with music by Jonny Greenwood of Radiohead fame, which I had no idea that this man did soundtracks. I haven't heard of Jonny Greenwood. I've heard of Radiohead, obviously. But it's like the Beatles. Sometimes you just think of the band name. But I'm like, There Will Be Blood. Hello.
Phantom Thread.
Soundtrack. Yeah.
What was the
pretty much? I'm a member of the Church of Paul Thomas Anderson, so I'm very well aware of the Jonny Greenwood experience. And was also just like a big Radiohead fan in high school, which is maybe a bit for my sort of surprise comment, is I was more of the person who is just like, the like lanky indie boy in high school that was like trying to hit on girls by saying like, I need to talk to you about Amnesiac and why it's important.
It sounds like you were very successful.
Yeah, really, it was great. There's just lines of people who really want to listen to my thoughts on Amnesiac.
Hey, listen, just wait until you find out that the other person in Radiohead also does film scores now, too.
Woo!
I mean, I always like to mention the film score because I'm a score junkie. So as long as
such a good one, too.
It was good, and we can get into that later. So let's start with a plot summary. During a 3-day Christmas holiday at Sandringham Estate, Dianna Spencer, better known as Princess Di, begins to unspool physically and mentally as her marriage to Prince Charles unravels. So let's break this down. We are going to try to avoid spoilers, and if we decide we are going to do spoilers, we will let you know so you have a chance to turn it off if you want to avoid that. So my first question for you guys is, how much of a royal family junkie are you in general, and how familiar are you with portrayals of the royal family on screen?
Not really. I mean, I think I've seen like the two most recent seasons of The Crown, and then just sort of like what I know, like, I know about Diana as a sort of like historical figure, but I'm not, I guess, just not growing up in the UK and just like this, not being into sort of celebrity gossip as a kid was just like, yeah, I'm not a royals expert at all. So like aside from The Crown,
So is
I
there a
have like
reason
zero
you
knowledge.
haven't done season 3 of The Crown yet? Have you did you just take a break from it, or
Well, so it's interesting. I've only seen seasons 3 and 4. I haven't seen the Claire Foy seasons, and that was only because the person I was dating at the time of seasons 3 and 4 was really into it, and I was like, I don't know, it's a new cast, it's history. I don't need to go back and watch the previous seasons.
yeah. So what about you, Hunter?
I don't know what you're talking about, Jesse, about being not knowing because you didn't grow up in the UK. Here's the thing. We need to set the stage with my family. My family, especially my mother and my grandmother, are obsessed with the royals, but particularly Diana, because my mom, like, she got married in the 80s. My grandma obviously like paid attention to news back then. So like my mom modeled her wedding dress after Princess Diana, which, like, when I found out about that, I was like, that sounds a little crazy. And then she's like, no, you don't understand. Every woman in the 80s modeled their wedding dress after Princess Diana. We had VHS tapes about Diana. My mom, if I look over at her using her iPad, she's probably reading something about Meghan Markle or Kate or whatever. So I'm very well versed in this. Is it against my will? Maybe a little bit, but like I still do very much so enjoy it. I love Diana so much as well. It's just, and I'm a homosexual as well. So I mean, she is a massive cult figure and like a massive gay icon as well, for being just kind of as forthright as she was, particularly when it comes to like the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s, when no one else was doing it and she was going so against the grain to actually reach out and talk to and like get to know people who were suffering with AIDS during the Reagan/Thatcher regime that really cast a lot of AIDS or people who are suffering from AIDS to the side, which obviously included a vast amount of gay men. It also included a vast amount of drug users and all of these different people that were cast as lesser than in society. And she kind of reached out and made that contact in a way that no one else was doing, let alone on her level. And so that's always been something that has stuck with me with Diana too, of just like, she perhaps her willingness to go so against tradition and so against the grain of what is considered acceptable within the royal family was her undoing, but it was also kind of what made her a legend as well.
My background with the royal family is I never gave it much thought or interest. We didn't really deal with pop culture in my house. Very restrictive childhood. But what kind of changed it for me is that I took a study abroad to the UK in 1997. So when we arrived in the UK, the nation was mourning Princess Diana's death.
Whoa.
And so before we started classes, we did this thing where we traveled for so many days and tried to hit different points in the UK. And pretty much every city we came to, we would visit the local cathedral, and every cathedral was stuffed with flowers and tokens of mourning from the country. And it was pretty overwhelming, as you can imagine, seeing all of that and the Candle in the Wind song being played at every pub right before everybody, joined in drunken revelry after. But, so there was just this big, it was a big part of my trip. And so then I've watched a few of the movies trying to sort of recapture that. But I have invested a lot in The Crown. And what I like about that show is I feel like it makes me, after every episode, I would actually Google, to see like how accurate this is. And it gave me a better sense of British history. leading up to. But I've been looking forward to seeing their portrayal of Dianna. And so maybe that kind of leads us into my next question, which is your expectations coming in. For me, I was so attached to the Crown portrayal of Dianna, I wasn't sure really what to expect or if I would like this. And it was sort of a competitive feeling, but I'm wondering what expectations you guys came in to the movie based on maybe just your previous experience with Pablo Larrain, who's most famous for Jackie and Neruda, but he's also directed a TV miniseries, Lissy's Story, which I haven't seen. So what did you come into this movie expecting exactly?
Well, to your point earlier when you were talking about, the mourning, I think that shows a lot about how respected she was in England as well, because English and particularly Scottish people are not afraid to talk bad about you once you die, and they did not bother to do that with Prince Philip or, God forbid, Margaret Thatcher. They really laid into her even after death. So for people to be actually really respectful like that in that culture is that says a lot. That being said, back to what your question was. Pablo Larrain, going into this, because I was familiar, obviously, with Jackie, I remember seeing Neruda in college as well, but I knew going into it, this was not going to be The Crown. I knew it was going to be something a lot more moody and atmospheric and very dreamlike. I knew that it was going to be focusing primarily on her as opposed to kind of the big picture, and that it would be something a lot more intimate, which I found to be pretty much the case with the actual movie. It's much smaller in scale than something like Jackie. Jackie already was on a pretty small scale of focusing on just her time during and after Kennedy's assassination, but this takes place literally over the course of 48 hours. So it really does get a much more intimate and much more narrative vibe to it, as opposed to a standard docudrama of this is what happened in this year and so on and so on. Shrinking it, do you probably lose historical accuracy with it? Sure. Do you get maybe a more compelling, slightly historical fiction narrative out of it? I would say so.
I was just gonna piggyback off of Hunter of, I think, seeing Jackie in college and when it came out, and so I think I had just heard too, and having seen the movie, that this was not going to be a straight Dianna biopic, which is what I was hoping for. I don't particularly like biopics all that much. So the idea of it being something that was a bit more ephemeral and a bit more kind of surreal in places, and more burrowing into the sort of psychology of this character, or the idea of the myth of this person, seemed a little bit more interesting than necessarily the straight docudrama version, which probably would have just felt redundant, because that's already what we're getting on The Crown, is essentially that part.
Yeah, exactly. People, we've had many biopics come out this year. One of them being Respect, the Aretha Franklin movie, and that one was not really enjoyed because of the fact that it just comes across like an encyclopedia, Wikipedia page, and we can read about that. But the way that they portray Dianna in this movie, it really helps us to reveal something about her personality that you wouldn't see from reading the page. It's more, what was it like to be her in this moment? And you can experience it from a different way, instead of what a lot of biopics do, which is they kind of go from the outside in, where you're sort of viewing the person. And in this way, you're more experiencing it through her eyes. To your point, Jesse, you were talking about accuracy and how it changes that. And I do think a lot of people will come out of this going, well, how much of this is true? That information is readily available online, so we don't need to get into that too much. But it is interesting that they start the movie by saying this is a fable from a true tragedy. Did that when you saw that opener, did that do anything for your expectations?
I went, oh, cool. So there's absolution for any historical inaccuracies that might be here. Cool. But also I knew at that point too, I was like, okay, they're probably going to dip into some narrative flourishes and maybe some things that like aren't necessarily as grounded in reality, which we obviously got in the film as well, with her some hallucinations and things like that, where it helps tell a story and helps kind of set a mood or like kind of give Diana's mindset with that. And so I found that to be pretty like, it felt pretty accurate of like, yeah, do I think that this, and this happened in succession in the way that it happened in the movie? No. Do I think that it is an effective way of probably illustrating the big picture of Diana's like feelings of her place within the royal family at that point in a much more intimate scale? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I'd probably still agree with Hunter. I think it just sort of re-emphasizes the perspective this movie is taking right off the bat. And I kind of love when biopics playing a little fast and loose have the kind of like arch taglines coming in, like the two I thought of off the top of my head. Hunter and I had like a long conversation a year or so ago about the Oliver Stone Nixon movie, which is basically, I forget what it says exactly, but it's basically just like, what's up everybody, we made all of this up. And it's like, this is not accurate. Or like, I think this is a terrible movie, but like the way Adam McKay opens Vice, which is basically just sort of like, we don't know anything about Dick Cheney, and it's just sort of like a shrug of like, we did our best, which is basically like, we just made all this up.
I know also The Harder They Fall recently was a one where they were like, this is a fictional story, however these people existed, like,
right,
and I think like, honestly, I don't mind that, because again, we get so many movies like Respect where it's like, I can sit here and be like, yeah, Jennifer Hudson's incredible in this, but it's literally just hitting the focal points of Aretha. And because I feel like so many biopics at this point feel like extended eulogies, there's almost like an expectation to not like cover anything touchy, when that's kind of the point of these. You kind of want those. And so like, if you have Aretha's family involved, or it's going to be a bit tougher, and having something like this that's so separated from the source, because obviously the royal family is not going to have anything to do with any portrayal of them whatsoever. In fact, they hate them actually. It gives you that chance to create something that feels less, like you said, like an encyclopedia piece, and more like an actual film that also has some historical elements to it.
Let's talk about the tone of the movie and how it gets set right away. I know that, Hunter, you came out of it and you had a take that you saw a lot of elements of horror in it. So can you talk about that as our horror expert in residence?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's just a really great sense of claustrophobia in the film, and that we're in this huge estate. I mean, we can see the estate behind you. It's massive, but there's a way in which I find that Pablo Larrain, in directing this movie, makes it almost feel like a hostage film, or like some sort of like weird home invasion thriller of just, from the start, something feels off. You don't feel like this is some grand, like, working title biopic that's going to be, all about the costumes and production design and things like that. It has fabulous costume and production design, but also you can tell from the music as well. We spoke earlier about Johnny Greenwood. There is this real almost noir feel with the music, and it's not light and fluttery and grand of like this welcome to Sandringham Estate type of thing. It's like, I don't want to go in this house. Something's wrong here. It's cold, it's gross, it's, well, not gross, but it's got this like weird heavy vibe to it of like, I can already tell that every single person here doesn't want to be here in some stretch of the imagination. And then obviously, I think including the things like Diana's hallucinations or just the fact, I mean, if being in a social situation you don't want to be in, or like that you absolutely just hate being in, that you cannot leave, that is a horror film in and of itself to me. Adding in the fact that this was shot really, really tightly, focusing a lot on close-ups and that really tight 1.66 to 116 millimeter, like very narrow, well, not very narrow, but like more narrow than usual aspect ratio. It just creates this real sense of like of a world closing in on somebody and eventually working towards possibly finding some sort of way of breaking out of it. It's very interesting how they use tone and how it just feels like a weird dream the whole time. Not necessarily a bad one, just one of those dreams where you wake up and you're just like, why did I think of that? Why did my brain go to this sort of like weird liminal tone? It just doesn't always feel like it's grounded in reality, and that's frightening to me.
Yeah, I think I'd heard this comparison before. I forget who tweeted it. It was like after Telluride, but like the movie I kind of could not get out of my head watching this was The Shining. In sort of like a big kind of spooky mansion that's largely empty, and even though there are these sort of servants and other members of the family there, but the idea of someone who in The Shining is sort of like physically isolated, but in here there is more of an emotional isolation, trapped inside of this mansion over this long extended period of time, and there is this sort of like ghostly atmosphere to the movie, and as Hunter said, this feeling of like the world closing in, of even if like Diana leaves the mansion, you know, there's this sort of horde of paparazzi that is going to sort of swarm her at any moment, and that feeling of being trapped in your own surroundings, and the sort of ghosts of the past kind of haunting you everywhere, and this creeping sense of dread that you're like never going to be able to escape this place and all of the history that is sort of like buried within the walls.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of horror movies that take place in the, you know, kind of creepy house, you tend to go, your mind will go to The Shining if it's trying to go there. But we also had The Drive in the car where Diana's car is like going up this road and you're following the car and there's this creepy music. We had the military coming in to like check the house for safety. The military is then switched out for this cooking staff that go in, and they have these cases, like what's in these cases? It ends up being fruit. But and we also have dead birds, you know, so that they'll often focus on these dead birds lying there, and that becomes a topic later. But a lot of times with horror, I think it's what the camera focuses on and chooses to that makes your mind go there. Because you could very well have this cooking staff come in and they could have put some light, floaty, you know, whimsical music over top of it. You would have had a completely different feel. But in this case here, it made your mind just knows there's danger, and there's a sign that says they can hear you. Like, lower your voices, they can hear you. And they show us this sign, and it's just all these things they do to kind of get you feeling unease that I think worked really well for the horror vibe.
There's also an aspect to like the scene with the soldiers that opens up the movie. I mean, that there's we can maybe talk a bit about like the all the metaphors that place in this movie, because there's like 20, but there is this kind of clear metaphor of like food as a weapon and food as warfare in this. That's, I think, like very clear in like bringing the food to in these sort of like military crates, and the way that the sort of chef played by Sean Harris is like he like refers to the other cooks as like
Brigade.
cadets or brigade, and they're run almost like a military, like I said, brigade, and there is such a people are exuding power by what they choose to eat in different meals, feeding into Diana's own sort of issues with bulimia and with her struggles with eating and stuff like that. And so that was just sort of a constant thing that was in my head of like the placement of food and what people are choosing to eat at different moments is sort of like an exertion of power, and people are sort of determining what gets eaten when in order to show control. And that opening is sort of this you could argue very on the nose way of kind of saying like, yes, food is a weapon in this world, and the what you choose to eat, the act of going to the dinner table and corralling with all these people, that is like going to the battlefield, and who is sort of making the choices about what is on that table is exerting power and dominance over the rest of the room.
Yeah. I also found the servants themselves to almost have like a ghostly Shining-esque energy to them, where it's like you don't learn much about these people,
right?
But especially like there is a scene specifically where Diana gets up in the middle of the night, goes to the pantry to get food, because earlier we had covered that she had thrown up all of her food, and is then suddenly kind of broken into by the like main page of the house played by Timothy Spall. And there's this kind of looming presence of him this whole movie of, I mean, it shows obviously in the beginning, like we said, the like be quiet, they can hear you type thing, but there is almost a reversal of that, of at any point these people can kind of show up and maybe not ruin a moment, but just kind of like ruin that sense of privacy that Diana is so desperately trying to find, that moment of just kind of like peace alone, because there's always someone there to kind of wait on her hand and foot, which might sound luxurious, but in turn kind of feels like a form of like really intense surveillance, particularly when it's spoken of later in the movie about how every single thing that she or anyone in that house does is used as a form of currency within the staff there. And I think it's just really, it's frightening, and it makes you never feel like you're alone, even so that they almost feel a little bit more ghostly than the actual ghostly specters that we get to see in the film as well.
I think it's really interesting you brought up food as a weapon, Jesse. I honestly hadn't thought about that, but it is very true. And there's this feeling, they keep saying like, it's time for the sandwiches. The sandwiches are in 15 minutes. And the dessert, and you have, that's a really interesting point. And here it arrived in these cases that look pretty ominous when you come in. So
right, they look like guns when they're first being like brought into the house, and like you almost have to like check like, am I in the right movie screen?
I was like, is this 28 weeks later? Like, or like, this has real like apocalyptic vibes to it.
Mm-hmm. There's he starts talking to the staff. The head chef is like, once more to the breach, my friends. So it is very military, which my mind didn't connect to that like you had, but at the same time, it was kind of like the military and the kitchen staff were a mirror image of each other. They operated very much the same way. So
God, it's nice seeing Sean Harris play someone good for once.
Yeah. Well, he's been in a couple things recently that were pretty good, right?
Yeah. Oh no, I mean like he's like a good guy in it, not a good movie.
Oh, I thought you were like throwing some shade.
Oh
at, like,
no,
Mission Impossible movies. I was like,
no,
geez,
I love Sean Harris so much, but he is definitely like a big villain actor. So like to see him play something where he's kind of one of two of Diana's only allies in the movie, it's just really nice. He has a comforting energy despite being oddly sinister.
I do want to talk about Sean Harris, but before we get to Sean Harris, let's talk about Kristen Stewart as Diana. What do you think of her performance, and did she channel Diana for you?
I would say so. Yeah. I think there are moments. I mean, it's definitely becoming kind of a Twitter joke now of like a lot of the more over the top scenes in it, but also at the same
They
time,
don't.
they don't. But
They
also like
don't.
also that scene after dinner where she's like running down the hallway, but also like stumbling over everything. Or my personal favorite one is the scene of her running in the field to go take the coat off in the opening scene of take the coat off of the scarecrow. People are just playing it backwards and putting Tenet music over it. Like it's just really funny. But I do find that there was this theatrical sense about Dianna. She was reserved, but there was also this kind of awareness of her always being watched. And I don't know, there's something with Kristen Stewart as well where she has a naturally kind of awkward energy about her. So putting her in an awkward situation like this, of like putting a character in that sort of place and letting her channel that, was really effective in my mind. I know some people are just kind of like, it's a little over the top, but I would so much rather a film be kind of quietly over the top in the way that gets me to emotionally connect with a character more so than necessarily hitting every single accurate, this is exactly how Dianna would have done it type of point.
I think it works in an abstract sense. Like I think, Hunter, I think I talked with you after we saw it about like she's more playing kind of like the cultural image of Dianna than necessarily Dianna the person, and is like amping up all of the sort of like mannerisms that we would think of as sort of signifiers of her personality in pop culture. And there is this like meta aspect to like Kristen Stewart also being someone who became really famous really young and became this sort of object of the paparazzi and was sort of like followed around everywhere and had little to almost no privacy. And so like I think I like the performance a lot, but not as a like, oh, she really captured this person. I think it's more of just sort of like she did a good job of sort of like upplaying it and going really big and really campy in some ways, but to sort of like give us the abstract idea of this person as a sort of mythic figure. But and then I also think just the casting of her in general, there is sort of like a fun meta read you can do of this movie that makes it more about like celebrity in general than it is specifically about the like Dianna experience, but just about what it is to be like a young woman at that age who is like insanely famous.
Yeah, and it almost feels kind of like halfway between like a traditional biopic performance and something almost like I'm Not Here, where it works into that real, like you said, that really abstract sense of like, let's get like not even the vibe of the person themselves, but the impact that they made down first, and then work in the subtleties later. And I honestly find that a little bit more effective as a film watcher, maybe not as like a historian or whatever, but that's also not my job. So
I liked her performance a lot. I thought she did a great job with the breathy voice and the like one of you two just made the point about being watched and kind of making a performance out of everything. Like the way she goes into the restaurant and looking for directions. Where am I? You know, I just
think of that scene where she's in front of the church and she's getting bombarded with the paparazzi, and it's just that close up of her face though. It's just so much, but also so little at the same time. It's a lot. But I do enjoy it. I would so much rather, again, I would so much rather someone kind of go big and get reined in a little bit than to not give enough in the first place. And I think she gives a good amount in this. It's not like Gaga and House of Gucci levels, but it's a more, I think, muted but still very present amount.
Yeah, I think going big is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, never.
I think sometimes we get a little too cosmic brain about like going big equals bad, but there are ways that like you can wield a really broad big performance for the benefit of the movie, and I would say this is a case that Even people I know who do not like the movie and think it's bad have like really liked her in the movie.
So we also have these house staff that can maybe in some ways represent 3 points of a triangle. We have Timothy, is it Spall? Timothy Spall. Spall as Major Gregory.
Timothy Chalamet.
That would be a choice.
Just a small child, but it doesn't take place in Victorian times though, so he would be out of place.
So we have Sean Harris as Darren, the head chef, and Sally Hawkins as Maggie, her royal dresser. What did you make of these three and their treatment of Dianna? And I actually wondered if, so you've already mentioned that there's two, one of you said there's two allies. I almost thought there might be three allies. I think it's not clear what Major Gregory's motive is in the actions he takes, but let's just talk about these three cast members and what you thought of their performances, because I thought for me they were all the highlight of like the minor characters in this film.
Yeah, it doesn't focus too much on the royals, which I appreciate.
Yeah, they're mostly kept at a distance, which I feel like works. And then I think it's more of a testament to how great these three actors are. Of like, these are not very these are not roles that sort of give you a lot to do on the page. I mean, and you know, to the point that if we do talk about the script, I mean, I don't think these parts give you a whole lot of depth or round. I think those characters are meant to be abstractions. They're supposed to be sort of vague in a way. They're more sort of meant to like like the Timothy Spall character is meant to sort of embody this kind of paranoid presence that's just sort of lurking around everywhere. But I think he's able to sort of like make that feel like a real tangible person in a way that it's written more abstractly. And same with like I think the Sally Hawkins character, I feel like in anyone else's hands, like that character is a disaster, and just for how it's written. But I think she gives a humanity to that. So when there's the scene on the beach between the two of them, I won't kind of spoil what they talk about, but I feel like that's a scene that could easily go wrong, but becomes more about these sort of like two women who hold a secret and kind of forming a bond, sort of sharing these secrets with each other, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just three great, I was almost going to say character actors, but I mean, it's not like Sally Hawkins has been nominated for a Best Lead Actress Oscar. Literally was the lead role in a film that won Best Picture. But I agree. It's very much so. I wouldn't necessarily say what Maggie became was a disaster necessarily, but there were some times when I was like, I think if like these weren't two very game actors who knew like kind of knew what they were getting into, that it would work as well. But they're all just they're all very likable. And to your point about the possibly three allies, I see that. I also believe at the same time it also could be almost zero allies, in the sense of I feel like at the end of the day, with maybe the exception of Maggie, while they do have a sympathy for Dianna, at the end of the day they still do serve the crown as well. And that's kind of this like inescapable like, oh, I like you, but do I like you enough to lose my job? Like
that's kind of my take on the Sean Harris chef character. Is he is willing to sort of like help her out, but it is like, I need to help you out within sort of the confines of what you are supposed to be for this family. Mm-hmm. I think, to get back to my sort of like food thing, of like, he offers to cook her something that would be appropriate for the table there, but that something he knows that she likes. And whereas like her decision on what to eat at the end of the movie, and telling him like, sorry, I know you cooked this special meal for me, but I'm gonna go do something else. Go eat something else. I think is sort of like a way of saying that what she needs is to be sort of totally removed from this world, as opposed to, I feel like what he is trying to sort of provide to her is this kind of like let me at least like make this uncomfortable situation tolerable for
Yeah.
you, but
Let me-
you don't need to sort of like rock the boat anymore, but
Yeah.
like we'll meet you halfway.
Let's make this hostage situation like, let me get you a pillow at least, like type
Right.
of like, you know, like, listen, I know, and I mean, he gives her the warnings of like, listen, this is how it goes down here. This is like what people expect from you. This is what people talk about you about. This is what they expect of you, period. I cannot change that, but I can at least maybe help your time be a bit easier, because it obviously seems like you're struggling right now and everyone knows it. But again, no one's upending tradition, because you can't really approach the royal family as at least a commoner to, you know, change it from the inside out, because they're not in. They'd still be trying to change it from the outside in. They can't do that in their positions with Dianna. Dianna can't even do that. So it's just this kind of like, listen, we'll help you, but you are going up against a behemoth of a traditional structure, power structure here, and you're not going to win, period.
They all have fetters on the ability that they can help her too, you know, with Sean, but he, within his box and within his role of being the head chef, he tries to help how he can by giving her advice that he probably didn't need to give her.
No.
And, you know, giving her, letting her know, like, this is maybe some things you shouldn't say, and letting her know how the people feel about you. And we're going to make, you know, make this dessert. And he even says, I want to make something that Dianna likes. He mentions her specifically. It's almost like he's trying to cook just for her, even though he knows that it's not maybe going to be digested in the way that he imagined.
Well, she's the people's princess, and
right,
at the end of the day, they are the people, and it's spoken of like, they adore you more than anyone else here. That being said, you are not the one in charge, therefore we can't really do that much for you. Right. You know, but we at least you know, can cook you what you like, or maybe spit in the queen's food or something. Who knows?
So are there any other characters whose performance you found notable that you would like to talk about?
I love the scene between her, William, and Harry, the like major and soldier.
It is very sweet.
It's so, yeah. And I just think, like, you know, especially knowing what some of these people became, aka William, you know, seeing it kind of like in this innocent, like, oh, the system hasn't ruined you yet type of like light, and of these two boys who just love their mother so freaking much, and who wouldn't, you know, and her almost like having them as an escape in the middle of the night, because that's the only time she can escape with her children. I really liked that scene, and I thought her and the two young actors who played William and Harry were just really, really great together. Not in it much, but the scene that they did have was really effective for me.
The story takes place in Sandringham Estate, but there's another house that looms over the story. How does Park House, Diana's childhood home, act as a character in the film?
It almost acts kind of like a haunted house, of like a house of old memories of a time in which things were, in her eyes, okay. And it almost functions. I feel the way that we were speaking earlier about The Shining and stuff. I feel like it also gives a little bit of like The Haunting as well, like the Robert Wise The Haunting, not the Mike Flanagan Hill House, of this like grand house of like memories, and they're not all good, but it's almost looking at a time in which that she felt a little bit more free, and that she somehow feels more free within this abandoned, desecrated home when she does go over there than she does in the ornately decorated, really lavish royal estate. It's this weird.
This is a section of the movie I don't that's kind of baffled me a little bit in the week since, if only because I've heard from like a few other people I know who have now seen the movie now that it's out in theaters, that have told me that Dianna didn't really have like that, like a more complicated childhood than probably this movie is making out. And I know we sort of like, sang the praise of like, this isn't doing the biopic thing, which makes me willing to kind of like take this whole thing with like a bit of a grain of salt. But there is a sort of like interesting devil's advocate argument I am hearing about this section that's sort of like the longing of it feels false because like that's not really a period in her life that she was probably longing for. But as a sort of like representation of like, I would have been free at this time, I think, I don't know, it's still a section of the movie that I'm kind of wrestling with, kind of knowing that information now.
Well, regardless of if it's accurate or not, I think it is sometimes when you look back on the past, even if you're not remembering it accurately, you're remembering what you think it was like. And she's longing possibly to not be where she is right now, whatever that looks like. But I guess I was thinking more about the fact that all throughout the movie, we're aware of the fact that she grew up not too far from there. And she keeps trying to get there. And she stopped multiple times. And just how she's thinking of that as home. But there was a line that she says at the beginning, because one of the things that happens right at the beginning, she gets lost and she's looking for where she's supposed to go, which was really strange even before she said it, because this is supposedly where she grew up. So how could she get lost? And she says, how could I get lost in a place I used to play? Now, I missed that line the first time because there was a lot going on, but watching the movie again last night, when she delivered that line, it kind of stood out to me as a pretty major giveaway and sort of symbolic about the way she feels about her life, is that she does feel lost right now with where she is, and she doesn't exactly know what to do. She doesn't feel like she's surrounded by friends or anybody that really gets what she's going through. And here, right over the hill or just beyond the fence, is a place that she used to grow up. So whether it's accurate or not, I think it is easy to look back, like I think about my elementary school. And honestly, I had a lot of difficult times in that elementary school. I was bullied and picked on, but yet when I pass it by it in the car, when I go home, I look at it and I go, oh, Murdoch Elementary, where I go to school. Was it really that great? Probably not, but life seemed simpler then from where I'm standing now.
Yep, I totally understand that. I get that with, not high school, but like weird, not even middle school either, elementary school. I live very near my elementary school too. So I've like 4th and 5th grade, I hated going to school, but like looking back on it, I'm like, you didn't know you had it made then.
We're coming to the close here. Is there anything you guys want to discuss before we end our talk today?
So this is a film, I don't know. When I first saw it, it felt incredibly like earth-shaking. I saw it a second time. It's still absolutely fabulous. I think it's just, I love the dreamlike nature of it all. Including down to, I know there are scenes in the film as well where she sees the ghost of Anne Boleyn, where she sees herself as, this kind of grand metaphor of like a royal losing favor with court. And I don't know, there was something, I just like the approach to a film like this so much more than I don't want to say lazier films, but films that are a little bit more cut and dry with how they present a historical figure. I think something like this is much more welcome in my eyes. It also doesn't help or doesn't hurt that I have a strong connection to both Dianna and Kristen Stewart and Pablo Larrain. So maybe the stars were already in line for that with me.
Yeah, I probably have to shout out like the soundtrack too. I mean, the Johnny Greenwood score I think does a lot of heavy lifting in this movie, and I think is I mean, among his better scores, and I think I was going in expecting something a bit closer to like his Phantom Thread score, which is probably my favorite, which is very swooning and sweeping, and with sort of like a tint of mystery to it. And this is more assaultive in a way, and is like, I mean, the sort of pea soup scene that I'm just sort of like remembering the music in that scene, which is very much kind of like some Radiohead songs that just sort of devolve into this sort of like assaultive, distorted like wall of sound that's coming towards you and making the hair on the back of your neck sort of stand up and feel really uneasy and uncomfortable. And so I think it's a great kind of creepy score of dread and sort of swirling inner chaos that is sort of adding this kind of heightened instability to the movie. I'm curious what you guys think of the script. That's maybe the one, like, if I'm going to put my devil's advocate hat on, is like, I'm not the biggest Stephen Knight fan, and think like
That's on you.
that. Yeah, well, I mean, I like some of his stuff. Like, I do not watch Peaky Blinders, but like I like Eastern Promises and what's the one where
Serenity.
Tom Hardy just like
Serenity.
drives the car? Serenity.
No, that's Locke. I do love Locke. That's it. That's the one. That's one he directed as well. But I mean, there's not
Yeah.
much direction to really be had in a film like that.
I just think he's a writer who's not. I really like the movie, and I'm curious to see it again. I just sort of think the thing I'm worried about seeing it a second time is being more aware of. I think a lot. Pablo Larrain is doing a lot with the style, and the performances are good, and Johnny Greenwood's score is so amazing. But I think like the script is a little trying to juggle too many metaphors all at once, and I don't know. I think it's a testament to how much all the other parts of the movie are working, that it feels more cohesive and more fluid than just sort of like a bit clunky. And kind of the more I think about like how everything is sort of laid out and Stephen Knight sort of turning everything in sort of an obvious on the nose metaphor, if that makes sense.
fair.
I don't have any.
Hunter's gonna jump through the Zoom and
No, I don't know. I'm literally. I also agree. It's the weakest part of the film, but also like
Yeah.
I think it was. I didn't notice it too terribly much.
I
do-
did sort of thinking about it in the weeks since, and trying to sort of unpack all of my feelings about like all the different aspects of it.
Yeah, I didn't have any particular thoughts about the script necessarily. I'm more of like a tone atmosphere person. So as long as that's
same.
doing something, I can sort of, I'm not paying too much attention to the exact words people are saying, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of like a filmmaker able to add a sense of atmosphere and sort of mystery to a kind of like elevating the script, I think, a bit more than probably like what it is on the page. I don't know. Stephen Knight can mail me the script, and I might be the judge of that. So
all right. Well, Jesse and Hunter, thank you so much for being on the show. Could you guys end our time by letting us know how we can find you?
yeah, you can subscribe anywhere where you listen to podcasts to my podcast, Film Inquiry is the Latest. Just tackling the latest movie releases and movie news. This is going to be a really busy month. I'm a little overwhelmed by the amount of releases coming out. I'm sure Hunter will be on soon to talk about Jared Leto and House of Gucci.
It was honestly my second favorite performance in the film.
It's great. I laughed the entire time. But yeah, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, I don't really tweet a whole lot because I'm trying to get away from social media, but it's at Jesse Nussman. Pretty simple. So, but you can also find me on Letterboxd too. Make lots of fun lists.
And Hunter?
You can find me probably behind my local Arby's somewhere. I don't know. So I write for Elements of Madness. I haven't done much in a minute for that. That being said, you can also find me on Twitter at HungerHuman. That's a story for another time. I'm also on Letterboxd as well, just at Hunter Heilman. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I keep to myself a lot. I mean, except on Twitter, I do be talking a lot on Twitter, but we're working on that a little bit. So
Okay, well, I'll have that all in the notes so that you guys can find those people. And I'm Lindsay at one of my stories, and this is the end of our time. Good night, everybody.